Hi, I'm Deanna Springer.
And I'm Dana Casey with a fun Stitch It Sisters sewing project and classic time-saving tips by Nancy Zieman.
First, let's take a look at the project we're making today. We'll be stitching our new Sew Organized fabric bins with Glowhaven fabrics by Lila Tuller for Riley Blake Designs, cotton webbing, Clover's basting tape, Pellon sew-in Peltex, size 90 denim sewing machine needles, and our new Sew Organized fabric bin pattern.
Make one or more of our Sew Organized fabric bins and organize your sewing room or any room in your home with our designer fabric bins.
To make our Sew Organized fabric bins, we'll first start by pre-treating the fabric. Press and starch at the ironing board and give those fabrics a nice hand while we're working with them. It'll press all the wrinkles out too, if there are any wrinkles. Next up, we need to make a pattern. So from pattern making paper, we'll cut a rectangle that is 17 by 20 inches.
Okay.
And then with a Sharpie marker, we'll draw a line 1 inch from the top. And that line is actually the cutting line for the inner tote or the lining.
So it's two patterns in one.
It's two patterns in one. To give the bin shape at the bottom, we need to form a gusset. So we'll trace around a square ruler 5 inches in and 5 inches over.
Okay.
So we'll trace a 5-inch square on the lower of each tote. And that's our pattern.
And then you'll have some nice 5-inch stackers for
because
other
when
quilting
we
projects.
Take our pattern, we'll cut out those 5-inch squares from the lower corner, and then we'll cut from the pattern 2 front fabric pieces. So I have 2 front, I have 2 Peltex, and then I have 2 inner tote or inner bin fabrics. And lining, inner bin, it's the same thing, they're interchangeable.
Okay.
And once you've cut out your outer fabric, the next step is to baste it. We're going to place it wrong side to the Peltex. And then we'll wonder clip all the way around the edges. And I have the wonder clip, so I'll do a little wonder clipping. And I want to turn this over too to show you that once you align this, the outer fabric is 1 inch taller than the Peltex. It's also 1 inch taller than the lining.
Okay.
And you'll see why. That helps finish the tote later. But we'll continue with wonder clipping all the way around the outer bin, the front and the back.
Okay.
And then we'll head to the sewing machine and we'll stitch. And wonder clips work really well with Peltex because it's a stiff inner lining that gives the bin its stand-up shape. If you used a regular fusible interfacing, the bin wouldn't stand up on its own. So after we've wonder clipped all the way around, we'll head to the sewing machine and we'll set the machine for a basting stitch. When basting around the fabric bin sides and bottom, use 1/4 inch seams. Change presser foot and engage the dual feed. The dual feed ensures fabric layers will not shift when stitching. Don't stitch the top though. You want that to remain free. And we want to cut some 1-inch strips of wonder under. And you'll see why now. We'll take one of those strips to the ironing board and we'll press it. This almost looks like a hem. So we'll align it with the top edge of that outer fabric and you'll press it into place. And I like to cut it about 1 inch shorter than the bin outer fabric. That way it's not stitched into the seam allowances.
Oh, okay.
So we'll head to the ironing board and we'll press that in place. And we'll do the same for the outer tote. So we have a front tote and an outer tote.
Okay.
And once that's pressed and basted, the next step is to add a handle. So you could use self fabric in a bias tape maker, say a 2-inch bias tape maker, and make your own self handle. This cotton webbing was handy and it's a nice coordinating color. And so you just cut 2 8-inch sections. And this creates a little handle. And you just press under 1 inch on each side.
Okay.
And then we head back to the sewing machine. It's measured about 3.5 inches down from the top edge. So you'll place that in the center of the tote front, and then one in the center of the back tote at about 3.5 inches down from the top edge.
Okay.
And then at the sewing machine, we'll stitch. We'll stitch those handles in place with a square box stitch. And then we'll stitch diagonally through that box to create a stability stitch. So that handle will not go anywhere once you sew that in place.
Very good.
So we'll imagine our handles are in place, and we'll place this tote front, and we'll make a tote back the same way, basting around those edges, adding your handle, adding your top interfacing. It's actually under paperback fusible web, and then we'll place it right sides together at that middle. So you can see this bin will be a nice size bin when it's stitched. Now we can stitch that lower seam. So I've turned that tote upside down, and we're clipping those layers together. Those layers are getting a little thick.
Yes.
It's easy to sew, but difficult to pin. So that's why we use wonder clips, because your pins will bend.
You're going to bend your pin, then you'll have a little
Right.
gusset in there as well.
Right. And then your pin will be at the end of its life. Once you've stitched that lower seam together, head to the ironing board and press that seam open. And then you'll have a tote shape that looks like this. So this is the outer tote shape. I'll hand that to you. We'll bring that back in a little bit, but we also have to do the same thing to the inner tote, or the lining. So we've stitched that lower seam and pressed it to one side. You can also do this on your serger, which we did here. And then we'll align those cut edges. And now, you know, there's no Peltex attached to the inner tote, the inner bin. So your pins will work just fine, or wonder clips. And we'll head back to the sewing machine and we'll stitch the side seam.
Okay. Just the side.
Just the sides. Once your sides are stitched, we've already stitched that lower hem. When you turn the bin side seam and lower seam together, I should do that with your pin side, it naturally forms that gusset. That seam just takes form, and then you stitch that lower seam. When you repeat it on both sides, you'll have a lining, an inner lining tote. And you can see it on our next sample. We've taken the outer bin and done the same thing. We've sewn those lower gusset seams. And this one doesn't have handles because I forgot to add them before sewing it into a shape. And it's nearly impossible to stitch your handles on, but you could have a bin without handles. The handles are optional.
There you go.
And then on the inside of the tote, you'll see the lining. We've inserted the lining, and it's loose. You just tuck it in there, and you align the top edges. And you could wonder pin this all the way around, or we like to use Clover's fusible tape. So I've applied the sticky tape to the back of the lining only, and then I align it. We'll turn this.
So just like a 1-inch strip to hold it in
Instead of
place.
pin basting or wonder clipping, I'm actually tape basting it.
Okay.
And that double-sided basting tape, once you attach it all the way around, your tote, your inner tote, is secured to the Peltex.
Okay.
The next step is to head to the cutting table and cut the top edge of the outer tote with a pinking blade. So I have a 45mm rotary cutter with a wavy blade attached, and you just cut that decorative edge away, and that finishes the tote, and it'll keep it from raveling.
Oh, okay.
The next step would be to head to the ironing board, remove the paper backing from the wonder under, fold it over, and then press with an iron. Press all the way around the inside of the tote, and then we have a finished fabric bin.
And our So Easy fabric bins can be made out of any coordinating color and go into any room in your home.
We hope you've enjoyed the Stitch It Sisters project. You'll find this pattern along with a limited number of project bundle boxes at stitchitsisters.com.
Be sure to tune in again for another Stitch It Sisters sewing adventure.
In the meantime, connect with Stitch It Sisters and friends on our social sites. Stitch It Sisters is made possible by Bernina, Clover, Pellon, Riley Blake Designs, OESD, Oklahoma Embroidery Supply and Design, and shopnzp.com.
Bernina, made to create.